This week I'm honored. I've got a gentleman here with me that a lot of you might not recognize. He hasn't really been seen in a lot of years, but this is Rich Cummings. A lot of you remember the Super Trike. Tell us about how you got started. I remember the Super Trike. It was super cool. It was pretty crazy. It always made me scared when I watched him bouncing around doing wheelies on it. Tell us about that. What gave you the idea? How did you get started?
I was driving down the road one day and I went by a place. The guy sold tires, repaired tires, and there were just two the 66-inch tires there. And I was thinking about it. God, it'd be fun to build something out of those. And I figured, well, I don't want to build a monster truck because somebody else has already done it. I tend to do things a little different. And so I got thinking about a three-wheeler. Three-wheelers were real popular at that point in time. And so but I couldn't figure out why nobody had done it, because about everything had been done. So I got thinking about laying it out, and I had some pieces at home, and I got the measurements off the tires and the length of the engine and so on and so forth to put everything together. And it's like, there's nothing here that says I can't do it. You got an engine, you got transmission, you run it into the drive train, you got a wheel out in front. I measured all that up and laid it all out, and it's like, yeah, this is doable. And so I decided, I think so. So I went down, I bought those two tires from the guy, and of course, rims for those things were unbelievable. They were 400-pound rims. And so I went to the tractor auction. I bought two 26-inch rims that were 12 inches wide, cut it out, shrunk them down to 25 inches, then split it and made it wide enough so I made a 36-inch rim for it. Okay. So I had a starting point, and I set the engine up on blocks, had that sitting there. I knew the dimensions for the front tire, and I looked it out. So the drive shaft, everything was coming out the way it really needed to. So then I took it one step further, and started putting tubing together and made the rough frame layout. Okay. Had to make the front spindle for the tire to turn with and everything else. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to put any suspension in because from an engineering standpoint, that just wasn't going to happen. But I got it all built, got that all laid out, and well, next thing is got to have a body. So got some plywood sheets and molding plaster and Bondo and everything else, made the mold for the body, and I went down to the Honda dealer and I got a brochure. It was a 2 or 3 year old brochure that had the rough look of the fuel tank. So I figured, okay, well, I can put a lot of the controls and all that kind of stuff inside of that. So I made that out of fiberglass, made the molds and so on. Just kept putting it together a piece at a time. And before I started on it, I called guys with Excalibur, Mike
or Dave,
yeah, Mike and Dave. And I said, is there any use for something like this? And they said, well, yeah, we do monster truck shows all the time, and they're always looking for something different. My intent when I built it was to do wheel stands because, if you're riding a three-wheeler around, kids want to see you do a wheelie. It don't matter what you got. They're doing one on their bicycles. So I figured, okay, I'm going to design it to do that. I don't know what I have to do about the balance, but I'll work on that as it comes along. But I told them, I wanted to do wheel stands with it, and they said, there's probably promoters that would hire you to do that. I said, okay. So
now, what did you use for the rear axle in it?
That was a major mistake. Okay. I used a Dana 70, or no, I think it was a Dana 60, and I put that in. I had to build a 3-to-1 planetary reduction to go on the back of the torque plate because of the RPM. You had to run really reduced RPM. As far as the rear end goes, I got the thing all built, and I took it out to drive it, and the first time I bumped the throttle, that rear end exploded. Well, to make it work, I had to use a 717 ring and pinion. Okay. So that wasn't very strong, and you can't run a Positrack in something like that. Yeah. So that means you got one pin going through the center section, and it just sheared that pin off, and then that took everything else with it. Okay. And I was talking to somebody I knew and said, well, you need, go down there to Ben's Truck Parts in Ohio. They've got a whole bunch of stuff. I went down there and they had a planetary axle, much like the monster trucks use. Okay. And it had the right gear ratio, so I could get the the gear reduction off the back of the torque plate and run that into the rear end.
Okay. So that was a Chrysler 727 transmission?
Yeah.
And then he ran a Hemi. Now tell us about the Hemi in that.
The Hemi was bits, and I've collected Hemi stuff when I could. I got the block from a guy that was a drag racer, and he windowed it, put a rod through the side of it, and traded and got heads. But I had a lot of the parts to build the motor. But I knew it had to be blown because you couldn't. Well, obviously you can't put a carburetor on it because if it's standing on its tail, the carburetor ain't going to work. And I talked to guys that knew about the Predators, and they said, no, simply put, it ain't going to happen. And so they said that. Well, I figured it'd be nice to have a flame arrestor. Nothing arrests a flame better than a supercharger. Plus, it makes a Hemi look like it ought to look like, like the old Top Fuel look.
Yeah.
So, and I'd done some trading, and I got that and most of the drive parts. There was a tractor puller that I knew. He set me up with an old 4-hole Hillborn injector. That's really, really an antique now because it was an antique then.
Yeah.
So I had that, and I had to run, they said don't run gasoline. I didn't want to run it because of the heat. So run it on methanol. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I really, this is a big step. I've never been there before. But it wasn't much choice, so, you do that, you get a barrel of methanol, and got a hold of the guys at Kinsler and said, this is what I want to do. So one of the things that, since it's not a maximum horsepower kind of thing, is it runs really, really fast. If you're standing behind it on a day and it's idling, you're going to think it's missing out. Because there's a lot of, it's got a cooling system, but I've never had to use it because it's running so fat. And so, that came together. It was about December when I finally got it to where I could drive it.
And that was, which year was that?
That was 1987.
1987, okay.
So took it out in the front yard and did that. Well, the other thing I had to do was when I had it in the shop, I didn't have a big ceiling height, but I had enough I could chain haul on the front, and I could raise it up, and then I could start messing with weights to get it to where the center of gravity is where it needed to be.
Okay.
And put a wheelie bar on it. The wheelie bar was about a foot wide. It had a piece of tubing down one side and down the other side. It was all plated up. It was damned heavy because I didn't want it to fold up. Because I knew I'd be wearing the ground with my head.
Yeah.
So I built that, got it adjusted so it was in the right spot. Took it out in the front yard and popped the accelerator on it, and it just came up. And it's like, this is too easy. Other parts of it weren't.
Okay.
But it kind of came together, and when you start off on a project and you get close to being where you want to be, if it's somewhat successful, then the momentum goes pretty good, and otherwise,
Well, now talk about your exhaust system. You must have had a mile worth of tubing in that exhaust. I mean, there was a lot of pipes there.
Yeah, there's 120 feet of stainless steel tubing.
Wow.
And the only way you could do that was, of course, with the bends and everything. There's a company down in South Carolina, I believe it is, I got the tubing from. And then not too far from where I lived, there's a company that had the equipment where they could do mandrel bends in stainless.
Okay.
Because they got to be stainless is nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just started piecing that together and put, because I wanted the flames back there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't want to be too close to where all the fire was.
Yeah. Now, so that was in '88, you said?
'88 was the first show I did.
And where was that at?
Pontiac Silverdome.
Pontiac Silverdome.
Yep.
Okay. So then tell us about that, because you probably never imagined you would book it as much as you did. Or maybe you did.
Well, it's one of those things where you cross your finger and hope. And I figured, well, I got this show for, at that point in time, it was called SRO. And when you go into a building like that, we'd been there during the day, and we put it in the building, and you park everything around the perimeter, and you got it all set up. Well, I'd been working in this building, this three-wheeler in a 24 by 40 building. Now it's sitting on the floor of this Silverdome, and we'd gone up and we'd walk around the perimeter of the building, and it's like, where is it? Oh, it's down. It's like it blew me away, the sensation of just being used to the things being so big, and you're in this building, and it's, you know, it's like a dime laying on the floor. It's,
Oh, yeah.
it's non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while to get my head around what was going on with that. And of course, SRO, you know, they had their schedule figured out minute by minute. You're going to go on here and this and that, and you know, we don't know if we'll have you run it once or twice because, you know, they got to keep the show rolling in case somebody breaks. So we went out and did it. Mark and Tim Hall's dad was the announcer for that show. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Yeah.
Fantastic announcer. And he was like, you know, just a guy you can talk to. And, oh, you know, everything cool and so on and so forth.
So how did the first performance go?
Just like it should have. I was amazed.
Okay.
You know, took it out, back, up and back, and did what they wanted me to do, and parked it again. And,
Well, now tell these guys, because this is, I remember my first time at the Silver Dome, and that place was so big. I mean, butterflies. Talk about the butterflies. You had to have a few.
Pretty much so, but you know, about the time you get on the seat and you got a ton of butterflies going on, and when they tell you to start the motor up, you go into remote control and it all goes away.
Yeah.
You just settle down and do what, you know. Well, I've been practicing quite a bit, and it's like, you know, you hit the throttle here, because the timing of using the throttle and the brakes on it, that was a little bit of an issue.
Now, did it have individual rear brakes to help steer?
Yeah, it had steering brakes.
Okay.
Actually, the steering brake system for it was what they use on dune buggies, little leg dune buggies. And so there was a pedal for each one, and then there was another pedal that controlled both brakes.
Okay.
And so to do a wheelie with it, you set it up, you get it up where you want to go, and then, you know, I've done very, very small buildings with it. Or you're in a big building. If you got a big building, you get into it, you can roll it a little bit more. You get into the throttle, you pop the throttle to have the torque to get the front end to come up. And then you got to start backing out of it to hold the engine RPM.
Okay.
And then when it's time to back up, to bring it back down, you got to cut the throttle and you just tap the brakes. Once the front end starts to come down, it's got the momentum, then you got to get back into the throttle to soften the landing up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing you bounce on it a couple times just in parking lots when you were moving it around years ago with no helmet on, and I don't think you had a seatbelt on either. And I've seen you bounce off the seat once.
Well, I wear a seatbelt with it and with a shoulder harness, but loose.
Okay.
You know, so otherwise you come up on that really, really hard.
Okay. Okay. So then with those brakes, you could steer it a little bit when you had it up?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure they didn't work too good.
Okay.
You know, because a sudden right or left turn would not be pretty.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, hopefully you guys are enjoying these stories with Rich. Tune in next week. We're going to go from here. He's been around a lot of years. He's done a lot of stuff in the monster truck world that a lot of you have never even known he was the one that invented it. Please like us, comment, give us your thoughts, and we'll see you next week.